Good to have you here. This is Omni View, episode 73 for June 6th, 2026. Balanced News Perspectives. Here's the news, the perspectives, and the questions worth asking. Ukraine's drone strikes on St. Petersburg escalate the Russia conflict, threatening civilian safety and energy supplies far beyond the battlefield. Ukrainian drones targeted areas around Russia's second city, prompting local officials to advise residents to stay indoors and warning of possible mobile internet disruptions. The strikes followed reports that Russian President Putin declined a proposed face-to-face meeting with Ukrainian President Zelensky. Outlets describe the attacks as a direct response to stalled diplomacy, with some viewing them as necessary pressure on Moscow, while others see them as risky expansion of the war into Russian population centers. Coverage notes that both sides have used long-range systems, yet the choice of St. Petersburg carries added symbolic weight given its historical and economic importance. Observers point out that such strikes test the limits of Russian air defenses and could influence negotiations if they continue. Advocates for continued Ukrainian strikes maintain that only credible pressure on Russian territory can force Moscow to negotiate seriously, as past restraint has coincided with territorial gains by Russian forces. Opponents of escalation into major Russian cities emphasize the risk that civilian casualties would harden Russian public support for the war and invite wider retaliation that could draw in additional actors. What evidence shows these strikes are changing Russian military calculations? Shifting now to developments in the Middle East. U.S. forces reported intercepting ballistic missiles fired toward Kuwait and Bahrain, while Israeli strikes in southern Lebanon killed several soldiers according to Lebanese military statements. Reporting frames the U.S. action as defensive protection of regional partners, while Israeli operations are presented as responses to prior threats. Some coverage emphasizes the conditional truce announced days earlier, noting that fresh incidents test whether that understanding holds. Others highlight the involvement of multiple countries and the potential for wider spillover. Supporters of the U.S. interception point to treaty obligations and the need to prevent any single conflict from drawing in additional states through direct attacks on Gulf facilities. Backers of continued Israeli operations stress the requirement to neutralize immediate threats near its northern border before any truce can be considered durable. What specific conditions were attached to the recent truce announcement? Next, attention turns to Armenia. Voters in Armenia head to the polls on Sunday in elections that will test support for Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan's push for closer ties with the European Union and United States. Coverage presents the vote as a choice between long-standing security arrangements with Russia and a reorientation toward Western institutions. Supporters of the current government argue the shift reflects lessons from recent regional conflicts, while critics maintain that existing alliances remain essential for stability. International reporting notes the elections occur against a backdrop of changing security guarantees in the South Caucasus. Those favoring closer EU and US engagement hold that diversified partnerships reduce vulnerability to any single power's policy changes. Those preferring to preserve ties with Russia stress the practical reality that existing defense arrangements and energy links cannot be replaced quickly without creating security gaps. Which security arrangements currently link Armenia to Russia? Meanwhile, an entertainment figure enters the political arena. Dan Greaney, a longtime writer for The Simpsons, held his first campaign rally in Los Angeles and stated he could no longer remain silent about threats to American democracy. The event is covered as an unusual entry into politics by an entertainment industry figure, with some outlets focusing on the symbolic nature of the candidacy and others examining the specific concerns Greaney raised about institutional erosion. Reporting notes the small scale of the kickoff while acknowledging the writer's long public platform. Those who welcome entertainers entering politics note their ability to reach audiences that traditional candidates struggle to engage. Those wary of such candidacies raise the concern that celebrity status may substitute for detailed policy experience required to govern effectively. What specific institutional concerns did Greaney highlight at the rally? Turning to Iran, Iranian commentators are discussing the challenges of moving from wartime unity to a period marked by economic contraction, power shortages, and renewed domestic debate. Reporting highlights that wartime controls have suppressed some forms of dissent, yet the prospect of peace is already prompting questions about governance priorities and economic management. Some analysts stress the risk of hyperinflation and infrastructure strain, while others note the regime's focus on maintaining control during any transition. Those preparing for peace recognize that prolonged conflict has exhausted resources and that reconstruction requires different tools than wartime mobilization. Those urging caution fear that lifting wartime measures too quickly could unleash pent-up grievances before the economy stabilizes. What economic indicators are most closely watched during this period? In business news, a major trading firm moves into new territory. Trading firm Susquehanna International Group is building market-making capabilities for prediction markets, including work with Kalshi to improve liquidity for larger participants. The move is presented as an attempt to turn event contracts into a more institutional asset class, with discussion of hedging challenges and potential client flows. Reporting notes that many existing contracts remain thinly traded. Those who see institutional entry as positive point to the potential for better price discovery on political and economic events when professional market makers participate. Those expressing caution cite regulatory uncertainty and the risk that shallow liquidity could amplify volatility during high-stakes events. Now, to really understand this story, there's something most coverage leaves out. Most coverage of prediction markets treats them as simple betting on events, yet the actual mechanism involves designated market makers who provide continuous bids and offers to reduce the wide spreads that otherwise limit trading. Susquehanna's expansion shows how professional firms hedge their inventory risk across many contracts while earning from the spread, a process that requires substantial capital and technology to manage exposure when volumes remain low. This structure differs from traditional exchanges because contracts often expire worthless or pay a fixed amount, creating different incentive dynamics than equities or futures. Knowing this, when you hear claims that prediction markets instantly reveal true probabilities, you can evaluate whether the quoted prices reflect broad participation or simply the views of a few active traders and market makers. Next time you see headlines about prediction market odds moving sharply, ask, who is providing liquidity? What is the daily volume? And how are large positions being hedged? Before we go, watch for further updates on how German authorities respond to the record levels of politically motivated crime reported for 2025. That wraps up today's Omni View. Remember, the best informed people read more than one perspective. If this show helps you do that, share it with someone who values fair coverage. See you tomorrow. And before you go, this show is part of the Nera Network, a family of daily podcasts covering tech, science, markets, and more. If you enjoyed today's episode, give Modern Investing Techniques a listen. Modern strategies for Canadian and U.S. investors. You can explore the whole lineup at neranetwork.com. This episode used AI voice synthesis of my voice. Editorial selection and analysis are my own.